Hello, welcome to Lawrence County History Corner. This week I am talking about the schools that existed in the Kitts Hill area. And the first Kitts Hill School was located on a property now in the Walls Estate across the road from where Scott Jenkins currently lives on Schoolhouse Road, sometimes called Crow Ridge or County Road 182. In the year 1925, the County Board of Education created a school district at Kitts Hill and appointed to the first Board of Education included Luther Frank Kitts, who was the son of Edward Kitts, who gave Kitts Hill its name. Also, T.J. Jenkins, Richard Anson, Edward Hartwig, and Asa E. McCoy. The board established a high school of the second grade in September 1925 in the old Lodge Hall with an enrollment of 36 pupils. Mr. Harrison was a principal and Mr. Fields was a teacher. Harrison would serve as a principal for 2 years, and in 1928, Mr. Fields became principal and served in that capacity until 1933 when he was succeeded by Mr. Webb. In 1928, the building was constructed and a high school moved in with the enrollment of 60 pupils. Now, I will say, if you know much about the history of the schools in this area, just because you had a school in a district did not mean there was a high school. Many of the smaller rural schools would teach up to 8th grade, and then students would have to go to another school district, possibly, to take high school. It has a lot to do with the fact that many times students stopped going to school in the 8th grade. Many of them were needed to be at home. So you will see that, in fact, the Chesapeake School District, there was a time when they went, if you wanted to go to high school in Chesapeake area, you went to Huntington to go to high school. You also see people coming to Ironton to finish their high school education and graduate. But Kitts Hill did have a high school, and you will see also in this in Lawrence County, a lot of the little communities had their own school. As time passed, those schools were consolidated into a much larger school system, and the first seniors that graduated from Kitts Hill High School did so in 1929. In 1935, 4 new schoolrooms were added to the building and centralizing the schools in the district. And by 1935, Kitts Hill School had an enrollment of 105 high school students and 203 grade school, or under, not high school people, and a teaching staff of 13. Now, that is just the beginning and a short history of the Kitts Hill school system. If you're looking for more information about Kitts Hill or local history, come to our genealogy department. We have a collection of newspapers as well as books. And when it comes to Kitts Hill, you can look at Kitts Hill. It's a rural Appalachian community in southern Ohio. This was written by Marilyn Thornton Schraff. She's done a lot of research in this area, and she's got a series of books if you're looking for more about Lawrence County. I hope you enjoyed this little piece of history, and I will see you next time. The storm that spawned the flooding in Scotttown also struck other areas. And in the semi-weekly Irontonian on the 8th of June, 1906, there is a description by the Wilgus, according to the newspaper correspondent. He talks about at 2 o'clock in the morning when the most severe storm hits the county. one of the most severe storms that ever hit Lawrence County, that section of Lawrence County, passed over Wilgus. But just after the storm passed over the Trace Creek Hill, Valley Hill, it met the one with the south. And of course, that was the one that they said caused the most damage. The damage done in Long Creek Valley was slight compared to what happened to Scotttown. Long Creek was at the highest was at its highest as it has ever known, according to the oldest residents in the area. But aside from the damage to crops and some stock, people living on Long Creek was uninjured. At Scotttown, however, that was not true. There was at least one fatality, and there were many others suspected. E. Schaefer's house near Trace Creek was moved off its foundation. Wall's store was washed away entirely, as was Jesse Burcham's store. And 1 mile above Scotttown, the Jesse Burcham store was taken 1 mile above Scotttown, down a creek. The post office in the village also was taken down the creek and ripped off its foundation. Water was up to the top of the counter in the platform store owned by and then John Dobbs, the veteran harness maker, and his wife had to be rescued. 2 feet of water was found in James Joseph's house, and the iron bridge over Trace Creek, just as the entrance to the village, remained anchored and intact. Mr. and Mrs. Perry Mannon, who was mentioned earlier, Mrs. Perry Mannon was actually the daughter of Mrs. Sayre, had gone to Scotttown to visit her mother, and Mrs. Sayre's home was in the center of town, just west of the pike, and the water came rushing down the valley. They saw that the flood was imminent. Mr. Mannon went for a horse to rescue them, and while he was absent, the house itself was washed off its foundation and carried down to the bottom. Mrs. Mannon kept her mother's head above water as long as possible, but ended up, to save herself, was compelled to let her mother loose, and Mrs. Sayre died. Mrs. Mannon stood in water up to her chin for 2 hours before she was rescued. She was either standing on a bed or on the windowsill with her head as far up as she could get towards the ceiling. It was reported later that Mrs. Mannon died 10 o'clock Wednesday morning, but the time that the article was written, no one knew if that was true. It was also purported that Dr. E. N. Miller lost all of his medication, or drugs, it says, and his library. But obviously the Mannon and Sayre family suffered one of the greatest loss. And that is just part 1, and there is more to come about the Scotttown flood.